Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I know it's always very difficult to speak after the minister speaks like that. But anyway, we'll see how we'll go. I'll be talking about tax and just that in relation to the sector that we have. So just wait to see the presentation powered on, then we can get going. So my name is Joseph Nonde. Just briefly about myself. I come from Zambia Revenue Authority. I'm an assistant director in charge of the mining audit. So basically what I do is ensuring that all the mining entities in this country are paying a fair due of taxes according to the laws that we have. Now what I'm going to be talking about here this morning, is just to run through to see some issues that relate to tax. I'll begin just to give an overview of ZRA and its position in relation to how the mining activities are being managed in relation to taxes. Then I'll talk about the major taxes that we look for from the mining entities, and after that I'll take time to talk about the mineral royalty tax, something that we are very familiar with, and from there I'll look at the framework in which we are operating, and briefly about sanctions, not to scare anyone here about the sanctions we have, but just to emphasize where we're coming from and what we want to see in the sector and what we expect to get. I'll present some figures as we have them from Zambia Revenue Authority. Now, just to mention that when I'll be talking of figures, we have restrictions to disclose the figures and collections from any of our taxpayers. It's not in our practice and culture to do that, but I'll present the figures as I got them from the entire sector, and then maybe I'll make reference to the figures that KAGEM have got, and I'm assuming that KAGEM has given me a leeway to speak about the figures and the percentages that I have, because I'm sure along this way on the summit we're going to talk more about the figures that they have. So just to start, I want to mention that Zambia Revenue Authority is a revenue entity. It was established way back in 1994, and it has a mandate to collect revenue on behalf of the Zambian government. Now this mandate in itself requires that collection of the correct taxes is done. Now for the government to achieve that through ZRA, as it were, there is a serious requirement that is needed, that all taxpayers should operate within the framework that has been set. Now if you look at what I'm talking about there, you come to appreciate that to collect the revenue, you need to do an appropriate assessment, and that assessment depends largely on the information that the mining entities provide to ZRA. Sorry, I need somebody to help me. I want to be checking there. I don't want to give a speech, but to discuss with the audience. I would rather do this way. Yeah, I think that will be okay.
We are providing a commercial break with my director. I wish you well. I believe in what you are saying. We are just rushing to the Copper Belt for the agriculture and mining show. Please excuse me.
Thank you very much, Mr. Minister. I appreciate that. Good. Now there are challenges that we've seen as Zambia Revenue Authority in this sector, some of which relate to what is obtaining in the mining sector. One major thing I can talk about, if you see there, is that the process itself of mining is quite complex. including the mining of emeralds. A lot of activities going there. So the complexity of the process that is put in place brings a challenge to Zambia Revenue Authority. When I'm talking of the process complexity, I'm talking of the fact that most of these big mining entities in this country are owned by multinationals. Now, the way multinationals operate bring a big challenge which we need to resolve. Now, besides the challenges that come from multinationals, the minister just a while ago was talking of the fact that most of the emerald or gemstone miners or operators are small in numbers, quite small in sizes, in other words. They are not big enough. There are very few players we can count on, and gemstone, for example, Gemfield being one of them, and their subsidiary here, Kajem. But when you look at the rest of them, there is a big challenge that we have, and that one, as I've mentioned there, is something that relates to record keeping. So you notice that most of these small mines don't keep records. And remember, I said that for us to determine the revenue, we need to look at the records. So that poses a big challenge. And along the way, we'll see what we're looking at and what our view as ZRA is to ensure that we get around that and get the revenue that is needed by the government. Now, just as a recap, Zambia is so much dependent on the revenue that is coming from the mining sector. And like I've mentioned, most of the large-scale mining is being managed by multinational enterprises through subsidiary operations, and this has posed a challenge. But beyond just the way the mining sector has been framed, there are a lot of issues that are coming. As we speak now, and just as the minister himself indicated, there's a lot of mounting pressure that is being put on government and also on Zambia Revenue Authority to ensure that revenue is collected from this important sector. Besides that, we are getting a lot of interest from the media people, and we have a lot of organizations that are taking keen interest and putting a complaint that nothing or not much is coming from the mining sector. So the question that we need to ask ourselves is, will the gemstone sector escape public scrutiny? And if they are going to escape public scrutiny, for how long? So this in itself entails that since a lot of people are taking interest in what is happening in the gemstone sector, we need to pay attention to what we are doing as players in the industry. So ZRA wants to ensure that we get the correct amount of tax from the sector, and the sector needs to come on board and ensure that some of those challenges we've mentioned are overcome. Issues that have to do with poor record keeping shouldn't be something that we need to continue hearing from the players in the gemstone sector. And when the operators are being managed by multinationals, issues that later on I've seen are going to be discussed, like transfer pricing and shifting the profits from one area to the other, those are issues that we need to pay attention to, because everyone else is paying attention to the sector and they are complaining. They want to see that revenue or return comes from this sector. Now, from the point of Zambia Revenue Authority, how are we taxing and how are we administering the taxes as regards to the mining sector in general, and in particular to the sector that we're talking about, the gemstone? From the ZRA point of view, I want to state that way back from 2006, IMF had proposed some changes that needed to be done so that there can be efficiency in the management of taxes. So instead of just having departments that were dependent on taxes, we changed the approach so that we can look at taxpayers based on their sizes. So we're now dealing with taxes and managing our taxpayers in terms of the contributions that they make to ZRA. So we're now having what we are calling the large taxpayer office, okay, which is under the domestic taxes, and then we have the customs and excise that we are familiar with when you are importing your goods. Now, under the large taxpayer office, where we have the big multinationals or specialized industries, that's where we also have the mining taxation unit. Now, what this means is that while most of the mining entities are not big enough, not all of them would qualify to be large taxpayers. Because of the importance that the mining activity has on this country, we've considered an approach where all the mining entities, regardless of their size, to be managed under the large taxpayer office. So the same service that we intend to offer to a large mining operation is the same service that we are ready to give to a very small mine that is operating in Lufanyama. The same service that we are willing to give to a mine that is operating far in Kalomo. Why are we doing this? Because we want to help them to grow, and we know that the activities that they have and the revenue that they are supposed to bring is something that is very vital to the sector. That having said, what are some of the taxes or major taxes that we expect to be paid? I'm sure if you've been in this sector for a long time and you've been running this business, you know some of those taxes that you've already paid. So various legislations impose different types of taxes that need to be paid, and as a mining unit where I come from, we're looking at the major taxes to be the company tax. Now, company tax is basically corporation tax that an entity is expected to pay based on the profit that they get. Now, if you look at the law, there are also provisions of what we're calling the variable tax, where if the percentage of your profit goes beyond 8% of your sales, okay, then you graduate to pay more. But the basic rate is 30% for company tax, but you can pay 31 up to 45% depending on the ratio that your profit is towards the revenue or the sales that you've had. We have also the mineral royalty, and there is the VAT and the withholding taxes, which I'm sure we are familiar with there. Maybe just to talk more on mineral royalty. I decided to take time to talk about the mineral royalty because I know that the mineral royalty is something that is paid on the gross value of the minerals. In other words, the sales. This is a true reflection of the sales of the gemstone industry. If as ZRA we are not collecting enough based on the declarations that are given to us, it means that the sales value of the emeralds that are coming out of this country are also low. But then we have to ask ourselves, is it really true that the quantities that we have, the sales that we are having and are being declared to the government are low? The minister indicated that there are a lot of people that are having secondary market hand-to-hand methods and they are not declaring that. So what we'll be indicating here are the values of the mineral royalty, and that is a reflection of what we have captured as the gross values of the emeralds that have gone out of the country. For those that go without being declared, then no taxes have been paid. Now, mineral royalty, basically it's a compensation that the government wants to get for the minerals that are extracted from the ground. And they are charged under the Mines and Minerals Development Act. And they are paid by the person that holds those mining licenses, and gemstone mining license is one of them. So a person that is engaged in dealing with gemstones is also expected to pay the mineral royalty. That's how it goes. Now, what are the percentages? I had put this just to make us know where we are coming from and where we're heading to. If you notice, prior to 2012, there were various rates that were imposed. We used to have 5% on precious metals, energy minerals we used to have 3%, industrial minerals we used to have 3%. Now for the gemstone we used to have 5%. It was always higher than the other ones. But after 2012, the mineral royalty rate has been put at 6% across the board. So there's just been 1% increase from the one which was there before. So this mineral royalty, once it's calculated and determined, it has to be paid to Zambia Revenue Authority for the month following the sale. In other words, if you have the sales for May, then by the 14th of June, you are supposed to make the payments to Zambia Revenue Authority. How is this computed? Normally, it's supposed to be based on the quantities that are sold, that you have. For the industry, it's always a challenge to determine the quantities. When I was looking at the statistics that I'll present later on, I asked my colleagues in customs to extract the quantities, and what I was being given were kgs. Before I came here, I was asked, can I determine the quantities, the number of carats that have been exported out of Zambia? It was very difficult because we don't keep the quantities in that format. When we're exporting, what we keep are the kgs of the emeralds that we're exporting. And I've been thinking probably we need to change the system soon enough so that maybe what we start capturing when these minerals, these emeralds are exported are the carats. And maybe we should have the prices based on the carats, and then we can get the mineral royalty, which is high enough, as opposed to just the kgs that we've been capturing. So when you look at how mineral royalty is calculated, we have two values. We have what we call the norm value, and we also have what we call the gross value. Now, the norm value is something which is applied generally on base metals like copper, those that have the prices quoted on the London Metal Exchange. So use that price against the quantities of that mineral. But for the gemstones, what we're using is the gross value. Now, the gross value is the price that is for the mineral as a whole, as a gemstone. Now, let me just read to you what the definition is for the gross value as put in our law. We normally say that the gross value is the realized price for sale free on board at the point of export in Zambia or point of delivery within Zambia. So that's the realizable value. We still leave it to the sale price that you're going to have. If you sell more, then it means the value of your minerals are going to be more. If you sell less, then it's going to be less, and mineral royalty is going to be calculated based on that value. What is the framework? The regulatory framework, ladies and gentlemen, is one which gives powers to the Commissioner General and officers of Zambia Revenue Authority to ensure that they achieve the mandate of collecting the correct tax. I'd mentioned earlier on that we have a challenge in the gemstone sector where most of the players do not have proper record keeping. So what is it that a ZRA officer is going to do to ensure that the mineral royalty and all the other taxes are collected, regardless of the fact that the records that are being presented are inadequate and in many instances are not there? According to the law that we enforce, particularly the Income Tax Act in Section 58, it allows the Commissioner General to require all taxpayers to provide information, to provide documentation that the Commissioner General needs to check. So if we're at the mine site and we ask for records and those records are not there, it simply means that you are not giving us what we need to receive as Zambia Revenue Authority. The same thing with the VAT Act. And in fact, the Customs Act even allows and empowers the officers to seize the documentation. If there isn't enough documentation for the export that is being done, or the minerals have been found and there are no documentation, officers have a right to seize the minerals and keep them because documentation is not there. And if they do that, they are doing it within the provisions of the law. Now, the law that we are enforcing now has even gone further. We are putting in place transfer pricing regulations which we have, and we're even enhancing them more because we know that there are multinational players who could be shifting profits from one area to the other. But what Zambia has done to ensure that we are not left and we don't lose out from the revenues that we should be getting is the fact that we know where some of these gemstones, the minerals are going once they are sold from Zambia. So Zambia as a country has also provided for arrangements with other tax jurisdictions around the world to enter into agreements to exchange the information. Those are the ones which we call tax information exchange agreements. So if the minerals are going to move from this country and then they go to another country, for example South Africa, or if they go to India, and then we know that we need to have the information, we'll ask our Indian colleagues, we'll ask our South African colleagues if we have signed this kind of agreements with them to give us the information. We'll ask them, what is the value of those emeralds that were taken in that country? What was declared to them? Probably they have the capacity to even determine the value more than we do. That is, if we have a problem, they are going to give us the value. And if they can give us the value from that side, we have a right to challenge you, to challenge a company, why they declared to us $50,000 worth of these gemstones, when in our neighboring country, they've declared $150,000. We have a right to do that. And with this exchange of information that we are adopting, it's going to be easy. So the scrutiny is there, and we're looking at how we can also ensure that the mineral royalty and the revenue is paid on these minerals that are getting out of our country. What are the sanctions that we have? If we don't have the information, we have both civil sanctions and criminal sanctions on a company that is not giving us information. One thing I need to mention is the fact that ZRA is empowered to make a determination. If, for example, we can't get the information coming to help us determine the value of the minerals, the value of the gemstones that are being exported, the emeralds that are going out, if we don't have, we still have a right to determine what the figure should be. So if we have information, which we can get from wherever we lay our hands on, and if information also comes from outside, we have a mandate to say, well, even if your record, the information you've given us and the records that you have are indicating that you only exported 50,000 worth of minerals, the information that we've gotten from India, South Africa, or wherever indicates that it's 150,000, and the officers are empowered to make the best of judgment assessment. Now, this best of judgment assessment is based on the judgment of the tax officer and not the taxpayer. So it's very important that information starts coming and you keep all the records in place as they come to check and verify, because they have the powers to assess and come up with a determination. If you're failing to keep records and we establish that the directors are involved seriously in wanting not to keep records, we have a right to prosecute. And we have a right to hold accountable individual directors that are perpetrating that. But besides that, we impose the fines also on the company. Those are some of the sanctions that are there. If officers come and they want to verify at your mine and you tell them you are not interested to talk to them, which has become quite a norm, I know that the emerald industry is highly secretive and there are a lot of security issues that are involved. So if you go there suddenly and without appointment, sometimes you tell these officers, we can't attend to you now. If it is really established that the company is obstructing officers from doing their work to come into the premise, they can still use the criminal sanctions that I'm talking about. And sometimes they can get a warrant from the magistrate to come and enter your premises without notice. And if you obstruct them, that becomes a criminal offense by the person that is obstructing them. And it can lead to serious sanctions. So either way, the officers have a lot of powers on their disposal. But we haven't been using these probably because we believe that we need to deal with a sector which is very important, regardless of whether they are big or small. So it's our appeal that we're going to get the cooperation that we need, and then we are going to give the support that we need to every player that is in this sector. these are some of the figures that I managed to keep, to extract from our system. I want to mention that ZRA, as it is, our focus is on revenue, because we know that the government expects us to report on the revenue. So we are more particular on maintaining the figures, okay, as opposed to the quantities of minerals, because we believe that the quantities are supposed to be declared with the Ministry of Mines. But for ZRA, we don't have much of the quantities, but we have the figures. I tried to extract what has been paid from the players in the gemstone sector. In other words, what we've collected from the emeralds exports. And these are the figures that I got. The other side, you'll see the contribution that has come in each of the years from the analysis that I was doing, extracting the figures that probably we've gotten from gemstone. These are approximate figures because we're still reconciling to see where we can get, but this is what I was given. Now, if you look at 2013, you will notice that what we've gotten is 6,648,676 rebased. And out of that, 74% is coming from Kagem. And Kagem just did one auction locally where they made the mineral royalty payment. So you can see that they are a major player. Now from our side, we consider Kagem to be a large taxpayer. Okay? It's a large taxpayer. That's why they have a license for large mining license in gemstone, because they do a lot of activities. But even if they are the biggest payer, and in terms of mineral royalty on emeralds, we still believe that the same service that we are willing to give them is the same one we should extend to even the smallest of the miners in gemstone. And that is our promise, because we have a taxpayer charter where we commit ourselves on the service that we should give you. Probably the detailed interpretation of these figures could be appreciated from this. How much is the gemstone sector contributing to the mineral royalty collected from all mining entities? From the figures that I got, you can see that the approximate payment of mineral royalty is just about 1.2%. So meaning that the majority is coming from the copper, the base metals, and others. Is this what this country deserves, ladies and gentlemen? Is this a true reflection of the quantities that are being exported from this country? So when public scrutiny is increasing towards the emeralds industry or players, it is with justification when you look at what the figures are telling us. Out of that 1.2%, 79% of it comes from Kagem. So meaning even that very little 1% is coming largely from the taxpayer that we've captured, and they are in our database, and we monitor most of their activities. So for the other players, this goes to show that I think ZRA is justified to move in and start questioning how we are managing our operations, how we are dealing with the selling of the emeralds that we have. That is the view that we have as ZRA. That's the view that I see when I look at these figures. Because the contribution from the gemstone sector is just too little compared with what we are getting from others. Like I said, these quantities I got were kgs. I couldn't get the carats. It was gone. We didn't capture that information like that. So those are the weights that we've had, and those are the values that have been declared. I didn't want to do the calculation to see whether if I calculate on the values there, I'll still get the same figure that for mineral royalty has been paid, because we're able to do that. But it goes to show that yes, quite a lot is going out, but the payments are not the same. So are the values of these minerals really what we're being given? If you say they are low grade, is it really the low grade, or could it be something better? So when you look at these quantities, I think the government has taken a position that probably we need to be doing all the auctioning within the country, because they have the figures that's just as we have, and they feel we can get more than what we have. So those are the figures that I managed to get. Now, what are some of the current developments and where are we heading to? Just like all the other sectors, ZRA is also refocusing on ensuring that we can be on top of things. We know we can, and we have the powers, and we have the mandate, and the legislation is there to back us. So we are coming up with systems that can help the players in the industry so that we avoid these disputes which come on quantities and the qualities. So if you see now, there's a program that is being initiated and it's going on to ensure that we can start coming up with a proper reporting mechanism for the mining players, and also to ensure that we start verifying the quantities and the quality of the minerals that are being exported. So we want to come up with a system that is going to have a centrally managed server where all the information can be submitted by all the players in the industry. And that information in that server, in this system, is going to be integrated to the Ascuda system, the one which is used for exports. So that the information that we export will be in this server, then we can compare it with the inputs that we are giving the Ministry of Mines, the information that you are declared into Bank of Zambia, so that all of us can go to one central place and extract the information. We want to monitor the figures that are being reported. And that is where we are heading to. And for verification, we are looking at ensuring that we generate a process that will allow us to verify whether what you've declared as the grade of these gemstones is indeed the quality that is there. And this system that we're coming up with is going to do that. I think what we are looking at is establishing independent laboratory testing centers where we can test these. And this is a subsystem we are looking at that is going to deal with the base metals. But in my view, I see it also working on gemstones. So while we have these problems of not knowing the figures and having differences, I think the direction where we're heading to is one to ensure that we create a system that will help you, will help the government, particularly Zambia Revenue Authority, to ensure that all of us can get the figures that are there, and we'll be reporting the same things. In conclusion, I just want to mention that and emphasize the fact that all the players in the gemstone industry, the emeralds, they cannot afford to operate without accountability, and transparency issues are issues that are going to continue coming to the fore. Okay, so we want to ensure that with that in our mind, we do the right thing. And I thank all the major players that have been contributing to the revenues that we've collected, and we want to encourage them to continue improving their systems, because all of us have an obligation to tell the interested parties that yes, indeed, we have the capacity, and what we've collected from these players is what they ought to have paid. If there are discrepancies, it's something that we need to manage. So all miners and traders should open up and ensure that they put their houses in order, they keep all the records which ZRA is going to use to ensure that the taxes are paid. So I'm going to end here. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.